Hey everyone, welcome back to a very special episode. Actually, I feel like we need a new name for this one. It's at the moment it's called Grow Your Tutoring Business, but this is like really special. So we've actually got Matthew Curnier, we've got Joanna Gibbs. If you don't know who these people are, I'm going to just hand over to them in a minute so they can introduce themselves. We've come up with a name that's called Three Bosses in a Podcast. So this is a chance for us to get to know Joanna and Matthew, but we also want to make this a regular thing for the podcast. So before we get into what this podcast is really about, let's get introductions from you first. So Joanna, do you want to go first for us?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. So I'm Joanna Gibbs. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Sensational Tutors. So a little bit of background behind about myself. I'm a teacher. I qualified quite a few years ago. You're
not that old, Joanna. You're not that old.
I actually am. I feel it. I actually wanted initially to become a speech and language therapist. So I went down that route, worked in health, worked for the NHS. Loved helping individuals and supporting the world. So I moved over to India, worked in a slum school in India, then worked in South Korea for 3 years, then over in Australia, then in Jakarta, and came back to the UK a few years afterwards. And having gained my QTS overseas, actually, came back to the UK and was observing the education system here in the UK, especially the level of support for children with special needs. And also the fact that the teachers who I was working with in the classroom weren't feeling valued or fulfilled. So I wanted to create a community and a platform for those individual teachers so that they felt that they were able to make a difference, but also to fulfill my mission and ambition, which is to support children with special needs and those with SEND.
Amazing. That's we need to dig into some of those stories, but I know that we want to get into the podcast. So Joanna, we're going to have to put a pin in some of those things. We would explore the whole India, South Korea, and getting your QTS abroad. I think as we move through the podcast episodes, some of that stuff sounds absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And welcome, because it's such a pleasure to share a space like this with someone like yourself. Matthew.
Hello. Hello, I'm Matthew Curnier, and I am the director and founder of a tutoring organisation called Capital Tuition Group, which I set up. We are going to be 10 years old in September, so we're 9 and a bit years old. Very, very similarly to Joanna, I'm also QTS. I'm a qualified secondary science teacher, and I did my QTS several years ago as well, and sort of had a bit of a meandering journey into teaching, and a little bit like Joanna, I guess, lived and worked abroad. I lived in Canada. I started teaching, I guess, when I was living in Kenya, and then decided to come back and properly qualify as a science teacher, which I did. And then I worked in a school that was in special measures, which was probably the most amazing form of teacher training. A bit like when you drive a car, right? You learn to drive a car, but you actually learn to pass your test. And then once you've got your license, you then learn to drive, right? That's in my head, that's the way it works. And it's very similar, I think, to the teaching game. You learn how to teach, basically pass your QTS, then you have your first post, and then you really learn how to teach. And that was an incredible journey. And I worked under a super head called Alex Russell, who has now been knighted for his services to education, and then sort of moved up the ranks. Became head of year 11, and then I did my SLE qualification or training. SLE is a specialist leader of education. My job was to go in and around schools before Ofsted, after Ofsted, to improve the teaching and learning in science departments. So that's my little journey in a nutshell.
Do you know what? I always feel envious when people said they've like traveled the world, they've done their teaching. Like I grew up in Margate. moved to Canterbury, did my teaching, and then I'm here. Like, there's nothing exotic really. I want to try. I might have to come up with a story, I think, and add it in
Richard,
somewhere.
you went to China.
I did
You've
go
been
to China. No, you're
You're
right.
with us, indeed.
There's some
There we go.
exoticness in there. Well, and we should put that in now. Really, that's where we met and like formed relationships, because it was such a special place, such a special time, and like beyond like the actual trade mission. Actually, what we did was come together as business owners and formed a very supportive like bond. Actually, it's been quite nice, isn't it, since coming back? So
and share those tips and try to problem solve. Yes.
Well, and it's from that we've come up with 3 bosses in a podcast.
Exactly.
Which we're super excited about.
Yeah. Right. So today's episode, right, for the first one, we've got experts in front of us. So I have 2 experts in front of me who have grown quite large, successful businesses. And we've decided to look at recruitment. Now, recruitment's a massive topic, and we're going to try and cover it in the next 30 minutes, which obviously we're not going to be able to do everything. We have a list of questions in front of us, which is scaring me because I just don't think we can get through it all. But let's just start where we need to start, which is right at the beginning. Right? How did it start for you? I'm going to put this question to you first, Joanna. There'll be a lot of tutors listening who are just independent, who perhaps are full, perhaps are running a waiting list, but are scared of taking that step towards hiring another tutor because they don't quite know what it entails. They don't quite know how to take the first step towards that. How did it start for you? Like, was there a trigger in your business that you thought, right, you know what, now's the time?
Yeah, I think for me, like some of perhaps your listeners, I was fully booked. And I realized at that point, so by the fact that we specialize in supporting young people with special needs and SEND, lots of the support I was providing is sessions in person. And so I was traveling a lot myself individually. And that's obviously, that takes its toll. I wasn't charging any extra for the traveling. I would travel, 2 hours to see a client, but only get paid for an hour and a half or so, or an hour in the middle. And I realized that there was an opportunity there for me to still be earning, but overseeing the tutoring and putting a tutoring in place without it being actually myself. So that was one of the things. The other thing was that because I'm primary trained, I obviously can't teach secondary. And so it was very, there was no growth in terms of the business if it was just going to be myself. So I wanted to make sure that I could expand the company and fundamentally, to be honest, so that other young people could be supported, young people, autistic young people who needed math support, for example, GCSE math support, that would not be me, not possible. So I don't have those skill sets. And also that I myself, I'm an autism and ADHD specialist more than, a dyslexia specialist. That's completely different skills. And so I just wanted to make sure that there was an opportunity for these families to be supported by professionals who have the skills and experiences and training that I didn't have, so that they could unlock their potential, really.
Okay. So really, like from like that mission, that values of your business. Look, I can help more people here. If I get the right people in with the right skill sets and there's a need for it, we can find the right people, match them up and create a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much, it is very much like that. The challenge is it's not as simple, unfortunately. And it's all about finding the right people and going, doing it in the right way. There's so much paperwork involved. And that was scary.
More so now.
Yeah, even more so, which, to be honest, now we're a well-established company. We know what we're doing. And, we work with local authorities and schools, etc. We know that we're doing the right thing because we have been audited and the local authorities absolutely grill us, on a year-by-year basis. They go through all of our documents. So we are in a really positive position so that essentially we know that we're doing the right thing without having worked with local authorities, because that's how I set up the company initially. We're just working with private families. I felt at that point, okay, the legislation, the paperwork has changed as well, but it felt at that point that we didn't really know if we were ticking every single box. And it's so important to know what those boxes are, and they change all the time, because it is the safety and the well-being of the children.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Matthew, what about for you? Because I know a little bit more about the start of your business, because we've spoken about it before.
Yeah.
And it actually sounds very similar to Joanna's, that most of us probably start in the same way, like traveling around, providing some sort of support. When did you first realize that you're like, actually, this is something I want to go after, this is something I could grow?
So when I was tutoring, the concept of online tutoring was not anywhere near the same as it is now. You know, the pandemic has really like catapulted us into a social acceptance of online tuition. And to be honest, I think online tuition really has an incredible space and place, not for everybody. I completely hear that. So very similarly to Joanna, you know, I would be tutoring sort of every evening and just pinging around London. And you'd probably get about three, if you were lucky, 3.5 hours of tuition in a night. And the rest of the time, you could add happily another 2, maybe 2.5 hours of tuition. So you'd be starting tutoring at 4, maybe 3:30 if you were lucky to have a kid who lived right next to a school. And you'd be back home sort of about 10:30 maybe. You know, you're finishing off the evening with some of your A-level students who could cope with doing an up to 9:30 p.m. lesson. And that was exhausting. And B, it's not very efficient. If I think about, I've generally got a question. I'm asking you the same thing, actually, Joanna, is that if online tuition had been so accepted back then, knowing that you could get your 4 to 5 slot in, your 5 to 6 slot in, your 6 to 7, your 7 to 8, your 8 to 9, sometimes even your 9 to 10, you've just done 5, maybe 6 hours of work there. I've got loads of tutors who literally just do back. And they've done a 5-hour day of work back to back. They just know that that's their working day. Done. I wonder whether if I had that level of efficiency and therefore scalability, because you can just saturate many more hours of tutoring, whether I would have launched Capital Tuition Group.
Really?
I wonder. It's a question really comes into my head. I probably would have gotten there anyway. But one of the things that was very clear to me was that I had very soon reached my earning potential cap, and I definitely had a problem. I had a challenge, which was I can't raise my prices. And I wonder whether that's because I'm state sector educated. I've only ever worked in the state sector. And obviously you talk to families all the time. A lot of my students were state sector kids. And so I had this unhelpfully a bit of a self-limiting belief, which is there is a price cap. And this is it. So the only other way to increase my own earning potential is do more hours. But I'd very quickly saturated that. So I'd sort of expanded inside the glass box as much as possible. And I thought, well, where else can I increase my revenue? And I had a conversation with my dad, and he had just moved to Hong Kong, and I went to visit him, and it was the first time I'd visited him, and I was like, oh, amazing, Hong Kong, great. And I said, my God, Dad, there's so much money here. He said, well, yeah, people have ideas, and then they work really hard. And I went, well, I've got ideas. He went, oh, yeah, what? He went, oh, yeah, what? I said, well, I just be really quite good if, people tutored for me, and I didn't have to do the tutoring. He went, okay. Make it happen. I went, well, I can't because, the sky's blue and the sea's over there. And I just, it's Tuesday. And he, and then within the week, we talked about it a bit more. I'd bought a website. I'd decided on a name. I'd written what the website would say. I got somebody to start designing it for me.
Wow.
And then away, and then away we went. And that's how it kind of started. Sort of not to lose face, I guess. It was probably one of the hardest decisions I've made, and is ongoingly hard. But I cannot tell you how amazing it is to have the platform that I have now, that I've built over the last 10 years, to go, I can now do this, I can now do that. And I'm sure, Joanna, you'll probably go.
Yeah. The thing is, it's quite interesting because I think, and it'd be interesting to hear perhaps from your listeners as well, but my experience in Matthew both of our experiences somewhat similar in terms of that kind of like light bulb, I'm going to do it. So my journey was that I had a job interview on the Monday morning of a permanent position. And that was for a school that I've been working at. I'd covered 2 maternity contracts. So I've been there for 2 years on a temporary basis, and I failed the job interview on the Monday morning. But on the Sunday evening, I was on a first date with my now husband. On second date with my now husband.
Episode one, we're bringing in the romance straight off. I love it.
But what I'm saying is you just need that person to back you and go, you can do it. You know, your dad said it. And it's nothing for that. So second date, my husband said, you know, don't worry, I'll support you.
I was going to put this slightly differently. Do you know what, Joanna? I felt like yours started with this drive and purpose and helping people. And it sounded like Matthew got psychologically bullied into doing it while he was in Hong Kong. I in jest, because I know you've got high values. There's really only in jest. Look, I sometimes like things happen, don't they? Like the interview, for example, that leads you down a path that then you're like, oh my God, thank God that happened. And sometimes in the moment we go, oh, that was really hard, and I don't have a lot of gratitude for that moment, but thank goodness it did happen, because otherwise you could still be in the classroom.
Yeah, and it's that one person, and I just feel like it's so much about following your gut, and which is one of the frustrations, I suppose, and following your passion, which is one of the frustrations I have, you know, with the national curriculum and education per se, because there isn't this massive opportunity to follow your passion. And if you think about all these quirky businesses that are really successful, those, you know, topics and ideas weren't taught within the school environment. It was somebody that like picked up this opportunity. So that's really what I'm grateful, I suppose, is having the opportunity to fulfill my passion and interest. It kind of, for me, my interest in special needs started when I was 12 years old. This is another light bulb moment, but essentially I was 12 years old. My mum being Dutch, I was in a campsite on holiday, and it's a school disco, or a campsite disco, and nobody wanted to dance with this young boy who's 15 with Down syndrome. And so I stood up and danced with him. And I don't know if you guys, you know, are very familiar with individuals with Downs, but the smile of this young person was absolutely infectious. And at that point, I said to myself, I want to open a school for young people with Down syndrome. And that's still, is that going to happen? I'm not entirely sure. I'm happy where I am, but
ask your husband.
Kind of light bulb thing.
Your husband will have the answer. I like that, Matthew.
He'll back you.
When we're talking about this growth, what I'm always hyper aware of when I talk to people who have been doing it for a long time and they found success, is that we can talk about mindset in a really like deep level. So, like, for example, like I have guests who are just starting, right? So in the I would say like the usual episode, someone who's like, yeah, I've been going for a year, and we're talking about like where they're going to go to next. And obviously mindset always comes into it, but it's really clear that sometimes we're not at that level yet. We're still in the logistics stage of it, and we're looking for growth, and it's going to happen. And then they'll people or young business owners will, in a sense that they're just new to business, they discover this need to go, oh, actually, I need to really check in with myself. I need to like figure out what's the block. Like the sky is blue, it's Tuesday. Like, yeah, we can come up with lots of excuses why not to do this expansion. What do you think? Where do you think that drive comes from? And I absolutely promise everybody listening, I'm going to ask a recruitment question straight after this.
It's quite interesting how the conversation of being like, this is our first episode, and it's really interesting that we've still only started to talk about the inception of our respective businesses and our respective journeys. I think they're really pertinent question. But so you were saying about the mindsets. Just I've interrupted you again.
Why do you think you found it? I'm going to say found it easy. That's not really true. There'll be some people, I put a bit of context in it. There'll be some people that grow their business in a similar way you both did.
Yeah.
Like, to use your words, Matthew, you filled that glass box up. Right, I'm done. I can't go anymore. And if I want to, I need to look at other ways. But some people don't do that. They go, right, here I am. Here's my business. This is great.
But I think it's recognizing that. I think it's recognizing how much, well, work-life balance, are you happy with what that looks like currently? And are you happy with how much you're earning? And if you're saying yes to both of those questions, then why do anything?
Why would you?
Yeah. Because I think what's really important to note is, as much as it's coming across like it's been easy, it's an easy ride. I was saying to you guys yesterday, I don't know if I would ever recommend to any of my friends, family, or anybody else to establish a business. It is your way, every second that you live, you're thinking about the business. And
yeah.
Even before the podcast, I was talking to you, about a situation last night, and I couldn't sleep. It's things like that you are giving your life away to a business, which leads back onto the fact that, if you're passionate and absolutely driven, not about the money, but about the concept that you are creating, then fine. But really think carefully about it. If, for example, you're listening to your gut, you've got butterflies of excitement, this feels like it's the right thing to do.
Even if it's as scary as heck, which it is.
Yeah.
Even if it's as scary as heck and you're thinking, I'm still going to do it. Is this crazy? Because that's the other thing is that very similar to what you were saying, Joanna, there was a part of me when I was starting this, and I remember I was in Dad's flat and I was just typing I was even making a mock contract of hiring a tutor, what a mock contract would look like if I took on my first, client that wasn't being taught by me. I was thinking, what am I doing? And I felt totally and utterly out of my depth. I was writing, I'd never written a contract before. I've written an exam paper. I know how to, teach biology A level or whatever it might be. I didn't know what to write an employment contract for someone who's not actually employed, who's sort of a contractor with you. So suddenly you do things that are completely out of your skill set, and a lot of business ownership, I would argue, unless you've got a background in entrepreneurship or something like that, a lot of it is just throw yourself in. You're going to make mistakes. You don't know what you're doing. But the mindset is, I think, one thing that I will say about setting up a tutoring business is that it fundamentally is relatively low risk at the beginning. And the low risk I'm talking about is you don't have to put a lot of capital into the business to start. You don't have to start with 10K, 15K, 25K, 30K, unless you're going down the franchising route. And it is just a question of your laptop and an internet connection, and you are willing to pick up the phone and go, oh, hi, do you want to tutor with me? Yeah, I heard that you were looking for some tutoring work. You're based there. I've got a client there. That's only about 15 minutes away from you, or it's online or whatever. It's part of your skill set. So fundamentally, starting a tutoring business is quite a low barrier to entry. Scaling it up becomes harder. But it doesn't feel like, well, certainly back in the time when I was setting it up, it felt absolutely gigantic and enormous. But have a go.
Do you know, there was a really interesting interview this week with Stephen Bartlett, and he was talking about this, like what you're explaining. And he said when he sat down in Dragon's Den for the first time, he was like, what the hell am I doing? I think he was like, was he late 20s?
Well, he's not young. He's not old now.
He's not old, is he? I think he was late 20s when it first started. He said he looked to his right and he had one dragon on one side who's like, late 50s, early 60s, and another successful person on his right. Deborah Needham's on the other side. And he was like, what am I doing here? I don't belong here. But he was saying actually because he was feeling that meant he was in the right space. And I think when we talk about the reason why I've kind of like stopped the recruitment thing and asked mindset is because sometimes you get, and there'll be people listening who will definitely resonate with this, you have the entrepreneurial way of thinking. And some people, it's quite a natural thing and others need to work on it. Yeah. And if you can solve that or have a solution to dealing with that weird feeling that you have when you're writing your mock contracts for the first time, or putting your first job advert out, knowing that I don't even know how I'm going to decide whether the people who are applying are the right ones and whether they're going to represent me in the right way. If you can live more comfortably with those feelings, then you're going to be okay, because you're more likely to take the next risk and take the next step.
What I would always say is, because I'm speaking to some individuals who have reached out to me for guidance around tutoring and setting up their own companies as well, is to have somebody to talk to about your business ideas, not necessarily a business coach, because my kind of view of business coaches, I don't know, I've never actually had to personally work with them. I've had some good support from friends and family, to be honest, which I'm very grateful for. But I just feel like without them, I would have made more mistakes than I currently have done. So don't do it alone. You're not going to know what you're doing. And especially as a teacher, what I would say is incredible, though, as to where I am now, is the skills that I've acquired are just really, really exciting. And I'm delighted I've done it this way, as in I'm a teacher first and foremost, develop my passion and interest, and now developed a company, as opposed to the other way around. Because I just think the other way around is, I'm, interested in the money, and I just don't think if you're interested in the money, I don't think it's going to be successful, in my view. That doesn't kind of fit my ethos. I just think that the passion and the interest to provide the best possible support should come absolutely first, and then the money will come second.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, shall we do a quick recruitment question? Because I feel like we should. I'm going to skip one, though. I'd like to go to one that's quite a bit more meaty. For somebody who is very, like myself, somebody who's very new to recruitment. I've got a few tutors now, and I had one, the very first one actually, which kind of put me off. I employed someone, it didn't work out. And so it really put me off, and it set me back at about 8 months of, I think I'm just going to do this on my own. I'm not going to recruit, because it didn't go very well. When you've hired someone, it's not been the right fit. How do you cope with that now, maybe compared to when you first started? Have you got a system in place? Is it easier now? Is it still just as hard, like, to move people on?
It's a really interesting question. And I also think the answer to that question depends, at least for me, about where you are on your journey and how established your business is. I remember when I first started out, I genuinely was like, why would anybody tutor for me? That was a huge, I was like, and it was a bit like, would you be happy to tutor? Like, is it okay? We'll just have a conversation. And so my interviews were just conversations. Thankfully, and this is where being a teacher was very helpful, I had groups of colleagues, etc., who were, I'll do a bit of tutoring. That's great. And I knew them anyway, so I could vouch for them. And so that started my little core nucleus of a tutor pool. But then when I wanted to hire someone who had a slightly different skill set, like, I don't know, psychology A level, which was at the time not that sought after. It's much more sought after now. But I was like, I don't actually know any psychology tutors. So you then have to start looking further afield. And the awkwardness that I felt, or the what's the syndrome called where you're the imposter syndrome? That I was like, the imposter syndrome. I'm like, would you please tutor for me? Pretty please. And so I needed them definitely more than they needed me, or at least that was my perception. Now I'm like, you're not good enough. Sorry, bye. And I don't feel particularly bad about that. And actually, we had just a bit of a disaster scenario with a tutor yesterday. It happens extremely, extremely rarely. He's gone. I'm not going to use him again. And he let us down in a relatively big way, and that's not the standard that is okay. So you have to be quite reasonable. But having that conversation has taken me years to learn, and it's still not comfortable. It's still not comfortable to go, sorry, we're striking you from the roster. You're not part of the tutor team anymore.
For me,
Okay.
it's probably the most challenging thing to get right, but equally, it's the most important thing to get right is the recruitment. Your tutors are your business. The clients, from my perspective anyway, are not your business. It's the tutors to nurture and get right. From our point of view, because I have an amazing internal team to support me with the conversations with the tutors, we work hard from the beginning to establish those relationships with the tutors. You know, when it comes to the registration side of things, our application form is rather quite extensive. And I'm that person that will read a CV in 6 seconds and make a decision. There'll be something in that CV that either ticks the box or it doesn't. But you get to that point once you've read those CVs. But it's also then, once you've read the CV, once you've asked them to attend an interview, it's assessing that reply email as well as to whether they can put a full stop at the end of the yes, I accept the interview. It's the little things like that from my experience are flagged up really, really quickly. So, and it's jumping on them and kind of preparing yourself when you're in the interview to find, if you think it's not going to go well, to find an excuse to get out of that interview so that you so it's not such a harsh decision, be it that their availability doesn't work for the company or their skill set isn't, quite right. Because we don't want people to have a negative relationship with you or for it to end really negatively either, because everybody's, trying to do something good in the world and supporting children.
Yeah. And just because it's not a good fit for
Yeah.
you, there'll be someone else who it is a good fit for. And I think that's really crucial. Joanna, is it like with your business, particularly with you do a lot of like high level special needs, don't you, as well?
Yeah.
So I don't know, Matthew, again, this might relate to you in exactly the same way, but how crucial is it, or how hard is it even, to find the right person with the right skill set? Because I'd imagine some of the training that some of your tutors would need is quite niche. So do you end up having to do some of that training, provide that training yourself just to make sure they've got what they need?
So from our situation, all the tutors have QTS, they're trained anyway. But for example, if a parent phones me and says we're looking for somebody with PDA experience, I'm obviously not going to match them to a dyslexia specialist.
Yeah, sure.
So that's where our matching jumps in, whereby other companies, does the tutor teach maths? You're not going to match them to an English specialist.
Teacher.
In terms of the training side of things, we're actually creating a training platform for the tutors to upskill themselves as well, which is going to be readily available for the tutors. And that came about because, for context, so I established the company almost 8 years ago, and we have about 130 tutors throughout the UK, which I don't know if that's a lot or not a lot, but it came to the point about a year ago, that I was getting frustrated, not in a bad way, I suppose, but I know the skill set and the level of understanding of these 130 specialist teachers. And I just feel that if we are able to utilize these skills and create a training program, which we can, support all the tutors and maybe externally, to other tutoring agencies too, that's really something positive. So, I've reached out to a number of the tutors. They've created a training academy now, special needs training academy.
That's amazing. Well done. Congrats, by the way.
Yeah,
that's no mean
that
feat.
is amazing. Yeah.
When will that launch? Or is it already launched?
We are at this point we're doing a bit of market research to see if it's something people are interested in, actually. Okay, so I've done my typical, let's do this. Oh, are people interested? Let's have a chat. So but, depends on whether people are interested.
Well, and you know what? I'm just going to highlight that sort of thing there that you literally just described is the classic case of entrepreneurship and is the natural progression of any business leader who is, like you say, passionate. Because what have you seen? My guess is, if you're anything like me, you've gone, there's a need there, there's a gap here. How can I bring additional value? How can I bring additional value to my tutors? How will then that bring additional value to my my customer base? How will that enhance their experience? And so you're constantly going around and around and around and around to go, okay, I need to be better. I need to do this. I need to do that. This would solve that solution. And the other thing about tutor, which kind of ties in with the tutor recruitment thing there, it's definitely a case of quality over quantity. And striking that balance can be extremely, extremely hard. One of the things that I learned quite early on, I suppose, is that I'd have an application from a tutor who, I don't know, taught Arabic or whatever. I'm like, well, I've never had an Arabic tuition inquiry in 6 years. So thank you so very much. I can't really offer you any work, but you know, it's lovely to meet you. 3 weeks later, hi, do you do Arabic? Don't! And you go, it's just absolutely classic. So then I swung all the way over to the other side. I'm like, you teach underwater clog dancing? Sure, I'll probably have that. That's fine.
Can you sign me up to that? I want to do that.
Exactly. And then they wait on your book. And then they wait on your books for 3 years. And they're like, will you ever get me any work? I'm like, just hold fire, keep patient. I probably will have someone who wants underwater clog dancing. And interestingly enough, you will also take on someone who you don't particularly use, who isn't particularly good. And then through a need, because you're short of staff or whatever, you go, oh, I really need to fill this position. I'm going to. Just gonna just see how it goes, and I'm just gonna make it work. I'm just gonna kind of wait for the fallout and hope that it doesn't really come. And then you get showered in praise because this tutor has come into their own, or the stars have aligned such that this just is absolutely magical. And you go, oh my gosh. I've got one who's actually one of my education consultants now. When I first took him on, he was he kind of let me down on a particular, not in a big way, you know, just a kind of a slap on the wrist style thing. And this management happens all the time. That the need to manage these sorts of things is basically the crux of the tutoring world. And then in the end, he just started flying. But after about 2 years where he didn't really work, then he did a little bit, and then it was short. But I kept him on my books because I knew that I would probably need him again. As luck would have it, or as life panned out, he turned out to be one of my most valuable math specialists. And then he rose very high in his school, because very similarly to Joanna, we only use qualified teachers. And that's very specific. We do have we don't do training per se, but we do allow tutors to have lots of cross conversations, etc. And there's an MFL group, and there's a maths group, and they exchange resources and things. So yeah, recruitment's a really tricky one, because you think, oh, I won't need them, and then 3 weeks later or 2 years later, you think, oh, that would have been perfect.
And to piggyback off that, as much as so I was telling you guys yesterday that in my interviews that I've got a column that says gut ? And I think that's really, really important. Listen to your gut, and that has been really, really helpful. That said, though, there'll be those individual tutors that you take on and you're wondering whether you should have taken them on, kind of like Marmite characters. And, you know, we do come across those tutors that you're just not sure whether they're going to do an amazing job. And then you match them to a client, might not have gone too well. Then you match them to another client, not sure. And then you match them to the third one, and the third one thinks that they are, you know, the absolute bee's knees. And that third client has gone through 5 other tutors, and this, you know, final tutor is the absolutely most amazing one. So it's a really challenging situation. Because every family is different, every child is different, you are different as well. And as much as you can think that this tutor is going to work or not work, you just don't know when you put them in.
Sometimes you'll be surprised.
Absolutely.
And Joanna, do you do like specific matching? So when you take an inquiry, you'd be like, that's all good, that's all good. And then from that request, you can fill it with potentially maybe 3 or 4 different tutors. Do you then go eeny, meeny, miny, mo, or do you go, I need it to be that one there?
So they submit, or the tutors submit a very thorough application to the company. We go through that application, review their profile and see if that meets the requirements of the parent. Unfortunately, we're not fortunate enough to be able to have 3 or 4 tutors available because of the demand for our services. So it's very much let's cross our fingers and hope that there are a couple of tutors who are available.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to wrap it up. So I'm going to say, firstly, thank you. This is amazing, by the way. Like, I know we've recorded for about 40 odd minutes, just over. It's just been packed full of value. So thank you both, because this is exactly what I think we had the vision of, like just taking a theme and then just seeing where it takes us. And you've both been brilliant. It's packed full of value. For people listening, what I'd like to do is make a regular feature in the podcast where you can ask questions. So I'm going to create a form, put it in the show notes, I'll put it in the Facebook group, we'll share it on all of our other socials so that people know it exists, but also know that it's like a community feel, because I want to make sure you get access in and you can get your questions answered by these 2 amazing people. So thank you, Matthew. Thank you, Joanna. That's the end of our first 3 bosses in a podcast. Is there anything else we need to say before we say goodbye? Is there anything we've not added that we needed to?
No, I don't think so. Is the aim, just to clarify from my head and my scheduling, we're going to release 1 of these a month. Is that right?
Yeah, 1 a month.
Woo, so exciting. I love it. I'm so excited.
Yeah,
excellent. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think just knowing any questions to be able to guide us going forwards would be really, really helpful.
Okay, great. So thank you very much. Obviously, feedback's always welcome, but all 3 of us will speak to you very soon. See you later.
Very soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye. Bye.